She left her billionaire husband, but what he did next didn't just break headlines. It shook the world in ways no one saw coming. Olivia Bennet wasn't just the wife of a billionaire, she was the co-founder of his empire. The architect behind the ethical firewall that made Nathaniel Vaughan untouchable. Together, they built Varex Systems from a cramped apartment into a global power that governments trusted and enemies feared. He was the billionaire visionary. She was the conscience behind the code. But the day she walked out of his glass tower, without security, without a settlement, without even looking back, something inside that empire cracked. Cameras captured the moment the billionaire husband stood frozen as his wife left him. Markets dipped within minutes. Investors whispered. Employees panicked, because powerful women don't leave billionaire husbands without a reason. And billionaires don't stay silent when they're left. But Nathaniel Vaughan didn't chase her. He didn't beg. He didn't issue a public statement. Instead, he locked himself inside his office for 3 days, and then made a decision so explosive that financial markets halted trading, governments launched emergency meetings, and the very system that made him a billionaire began to collapse in real time. What did Olivia discover that made her leave her billionaire husband so suddenly? What was inside the sealed envelope she placed in his hand before she walked away? And why would a man who controlled billions choose to risk everything, unless losing her revealed something far more dangerous than betrayal? If she left a billionaire husband, what could he possibly do next that would shake the world? The cameras were already waiting when Olivia stepped out of the executive elevator on the 42nd floor of Varex Systems. The building itself was a monument to Nathaniel Vaughan's success, a mirrored tower cutting into the skyline. Its upper floors inaccessible without biometric clearance. World leaders had walked these halls. Defense ministers had signed contracts in the boardroom. Venture capitalists once fought for minutes of his time. Nathaniel stood at the head of the glass conference table, composed, controlled, the youngest self-made billionaire in cybersecurity history. His navy suit was tailored in Milan, his watch custom-engineered titanium understated, but worth more than most employees' yearly salaries. Every movement he made was measured, efficient. He had trained himself never to react before, calculating the impact. Olivia had once admired that about him. Now, she feared it. She placed her company badge on the table, then her wedding ring beside it. A small metallic sound echoed in the silent room, louder than it should have been. Board members exchanged glances. Stock tickers flickered on the wall screen behind them. Varex Systems valued at $43 billion. Nathaniel owned 26% personally. Even after dilution, that made him worth over $11 billion. But none of that wealth moved him now. Olivia, one board member, whispered, "This isn't necessary." She didn't answer him. She looked at Nathaniel. "I'm resigning as chief ethics architect. Effective immediately." Her voice didn't shake. It had learned not to. Years ago, when she was 12, her older brother Marcus had stood in a courtroom accused of fraud he didn't commit, identity theft executed through stolen credentials, frozen accounts, legal letters, public humiliation. Their family had watched systems fail them. Marcus had believed the algorithm that flagged him must be right, because machines don't make mistakes. He was 19 when he ended his life. That memory never left Olivia. It was the reason she built Varex's original ethical codebase, layers of consent, audit trails, human override protocols. It was why she insisted on transparency. Triggers embedded deep inside the architecture. Nathaniel had agreed back then, because they were small. Principles are easy when you have nothing to lose. Nathaniel finally spoke. "This conversation should be private." The words weren't anger. They were containment. She slid a sealed envelope toward him. "Open it when you're ready to remember who you were." His jaw tightened, barely visible, only she would notice, because she had known him before the IPO, before the bodyguards, before the boardroom became his battlefield, back when they coded side by side on folding chairs in a one-bedroom apartment, arguing over syntax and pizza toppings, back when he used to say, "We'll build something that protects people like Marcus." He picked up the envelope, but didn't open it. Control. Always control. As Olivia turned and walked toward the exit, camera shutters erupted from the hallway. News had leaked. It always did in companies this large. The billionaire husband stood still as his wife left him in front of the world. He did not follow. He did not call her name. But his right hand remained closed around that envelope long after the room emptied. And somewhere deep inside Varex's encrypted servers, hidden beneath layers of shadow reading she had only recently discovered. A dormant protocol waited, one she had written years ago. One he had quietly disabled. And the question neither of them spoke aloud lingered, heavier than the silence. What happens when the conscience of a billionaire walks away, but leaves behind the key to dismantling everything he built? The elevator doors closed between Olivia and the life she had built for 12 years. For a brief second, her reflection stared back at her in the mirrored walls, composed, immovable. But beneath that stillness lived the 12-year-old girl who once sat in a plastic courtroom chair watching her older brother tremble under accusations he couldn't explain. Marcus Bennett had always been careful. He memorized passwords. He double-checked emails. But when fraudulent loans surfaced under his name, the system flagged him as high risk. Automated compliance software froze his accounts before any human review. Olivia still remembered the courtroom clerk saying, "The algorithm rarely makes mistakes." Rarely. That word buried itself in her bones. Marcus took his life 6 months later. And that was the day Olivia decided she would build systems that never forgot the human behind the data. Years later, in a cramped apartment filled with empty coffee cups and blinking server lights, she met Nathaniel Vaughn, brilliant, relentless, impatient with mediocrity. He talked about building a cybersecurity empire that could predict threats before they happened. She challenged him on their second meeting. "Predicting isn't the same as protecting," she told him. He smiled then, not the billionaire smile the world knew now, but the young coder grin that meant he'd found someone who could match him. "Then we build both," he said. That was the beginning of Rex Systems. Back when they wrote code side by side on a single folding table. Back when their only security was a second-hand firewall and a dream bigger than their bank accounts. Nathaniel had grown up differently. His father, a regional bank manager, had been wrongfully investigated during a financial crash. A predictive fraud model flagged his branch as statistically high risk. Investors panicked. Regulators swarmed. Though charges were dropped months later, the damage had already destroyed his father's career. Nathaniel had watched systems collapse his family's stability. He swore to build systems smarter than fear. That shared trauma bonded them. But somewhere between their first million users and their first billion-dollar valuation, the language changed. Ethical override, Olivia would insist. Strategic inevitability, Nathaniel would counter. In the elevator, her phone buzzed violently, media alerts exploding. Forex co-founder resigns. Billionaire's wife walks out. Stock dipping for 8%. She silenced it, because what the world thought this was about was not what it was about. And upstairs, Nathaniel was finally alone with the envelope she left behind. He stared at it for a long time. Then he turned it over. His name was written in her handwriting. Not CEO, not Mr. Vaughn, just Nathaniel. And for the first time in years, he hesitated. Nathaniel sat at his massive glass desk, the sealed envelope untouched at first, then finally cracking open like a Pandora's box. Inside, a single USB drive gleamed under the noon sunlight. His fingers trembled slightly, something he hadn't allowed himself in years. Years of control, years of precision, years of absolute power. A memory hit him. The first time Olivia had walked into a server room of Rex Systems, insisting on a redundant ethical protocol. "Power without conscience is just destruction waiting to happen," she had said. Back then, he had smiled and argued about efficiency, about market dominance, about winning at all costs. But she had forced him to pause, to consider that even billionaires could break if systems failed the people they affected. Now, staring at the drive, he realized she had learned far more than he ever expected. She hadn't just left him. She had left a key to the shadow infrastructure he had secretly embedded across multiple untraceable accounts. A network that could reroute billions, trigger collapses in financial algorithms, and expose corruption he thought carefully hidden. He pressed a finger to his temple, recalling the night they had built Rex together from scratch, the cramped Lagos apartment, monitors flickering with green code, half-eaten jollof rice plates. Nathaniel had trusted her, yes, but he had never anticipated she would ever challenge the deepest layer of his empire. Not like this. His assistant, hesitant outside the office, had left the glass door slightly ajar. Nathaniel's eyes caught the reflection of the skyline. The city seemed calm, but he knew the ripple that Olivia could set off would not remain invisible. The foreshadowing had been there all along, her insistence on auditing even the most minor accounts, the secret backup system she had built in. The way she had always questioned his inevitability mantra, he lifted the drive, and his mind raced. Every move he made next could either secure his empire or destroy it completely. But Olivia's departure wasn't just a personal betrayal. It was a challenge. She had left him with no choice but to act, and the consequences would reverberate across the world. He pressed the USB into his laptop. Screens lit up with cascading codes, hidden ledgers, and encrypted accounts, each one a testament to the empire he had built and the secret risks only Olivia had fully understood. And as he scrolled, a single thought anchored him. If she had left, it wasn't just because of the envelope. It was because she knew the only way to truly test him was to see what he would do next, and that decision would shake the world. The first ripple hit before dawn. Nathaniel hadn't even slept. His eyes had traced every line of code, every hidden ledger, every backup protocol that Olivia had quietly left behind. The USB drive was no longer just a key, it was a trigger, and she had planted it with precision. The alerts came through on his private phone. Automated systems flagged irregular transfers in European subsidiaries. Stock tickers in London and New York blinked red. Virex's cybersecurity dashboards, usually calm with green stability bars, now screamed warnings in crimson. Every signal pointed to the same truth. Someone had accessed the shadow infrastructure. Nathaniel's fingers tightened around the edge of his desk. He remembered their first boardroom debate over risk. Olivia, standing with arms crossed, had said, "Systems fail humans, yes, but humans fail systems far worse." He had laughed then, arrogantly, confidently. But now, that principle was no longer theoretical. He called in his top engineers, a team of Nigerians hand-picked from Lagos, Abuja, and Ibadan, and instructed them to trace the breach. But every path led back to the USB drive. Every encrypted firewall she had created was still intact. She hadn't destroyed anything. She hadn't stolen anything. She had simply left the truth in his hands. Nathaniel paced the glass boardroom, floor-to-ceiling windows reflecting a Lagos skyline waking up under the harsh clarity of noon sunlight. He recalled her subtle foreshadowing over the years, questions about emergency overrides, insistence on multi-tiered audits, a seemingly minor comment during their 5th anniversary dinner, even trust needs a failsafe, and now, that failsafe was active. He could feel the weight of billions teetering on a knife's edge. Governments would react, investors would panic, and the press would not forgive a billionaire who appeared unprepared. Yet she had never meant to humiliate him. Olivia had always acted with precision, like a chess grandmother, anticipating each move decades ahead. Nathaniel leaned over the laptop again. The cascading code scrolled faster than his mind could process. Hidden contracts, shadow accounts, automated triggers, all designed to destabilize if mishandled. He realized, for the first time in his life, that the woman who left him wasn't gone. She was everywhere, embedded in the very systems he had built. He swallowed hard. He had a choice: shut it down quietly and risk missing something, or follow the trail she had left, knowing the consequences could shake not just Virex, but the financial world itself. And deep down, he knew this was exactly what she had intended. Across the city, Olivia stood in a nondescript Lagos co-working space, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows, glinting off the edges of her laptop. Unlike the glass and steel grandeur Nathaniel occupied, this space was functional, modest, and deliberately inconspicuous. A quiet rebellion in a city of billionaires. She typed rapidly, her fingers precise, each keystroke purposeful. The systems Nathaniel believed only he could control were now accessible through the protocols she had embedded over years. She had designed shadow accounts, emergency failsafes, and backdoors only she could navigate. Her plan wasn't destruction, it was exposure. Revelation, a calculated test of morality, power, and accountability. A flashback washed over her, the night she had first discovered the discrepancies in Virex's European financial reports. Nathaniel had smiled, dismissive, calling it a minor anomaly. But Olivia's instincts had screamed otherwise. That night, she stayed awake until dawn, tracing codes, verifying accounts, and planting seeds of what would later become her fail-safe network. Her own hands had built the chains Nathaniel now found himself trapped within. She paused, glancing at a framed photo of the two of them at the company's first launch. Back then, ambition had been pure, idealistic. Their shared vision had been a beacon. But somewhere between the first million users and the billion-dollar valuation, ethics had become negotiable. and trust had eroded beneath the weight of empire-building. A soft ping interrupted her reverie. The system had acknowledged her access. Red warning lights blinked silently across encrypted dashboards, cascading numbers and alerts. This was the first step, a controlled shockwave, subtle enough to warn without annihilating. She wanted Nathaniel to understand, to feel the weight of the systems he had built, the people affected, the consequences of blind control. She leaned back and exhaled slowly. Each action was choreographed, every move designed to challenge, not humiliate. She wasn't walking away from him out of revenge. She was walking ahead of a reckoning that had been long overdue. A single line of code blinked on her screen. Initiate protocol, awareness, and somewhere in the towering glass palace he called his office, Nathaniel's world was about to tilt. He didn't yet know she had orchestrated the first domino, and by the time he realized it, the repercussions would have already begun cascading. Olivia allowed herself a small, satisfied smile. This wasn't the end, it was just the beginning. By mid-morning, the first tremors hit the global financial networks. Screens across London, New York, and Johannesburg flickered with warnings, small at first, then cascading into full-blown alerts. Analysts, unknowing of the orchestrator behind the scenes, scrambled to understand the anomalies, trying to prevent market panic. Nathaniel sat back in his leather chair, the office silent except for the hum of servers. His pulse raced. Every alert, every red line of code was a mirror of the choices Olivia had planted. The shockwave wasn't random, it was surgical. Every financial node she touched was connected to a larger system only she fully understood. He remembered her words during their last heated debate in the office conference room. Control isn't absolute, Nathaniel. You can build empires, but you can't predict every human response. Back then, it had been a philosophical disagreement. Now, it was a lesson he had no choice but to learn the hard way. Across Lagos, Olivia watched live dashboards with a calm intensity that contrasted sharply with Nathaniel's turmoil. Each red alert triggered was intentional, a message encoded into the global markets themselves. She didn't celebrate chaos, she celebrated accountability. The systems were designed to expose vulnerabilities, yes, but they were also a mirror reflecting the true cost of unchecked power. Her mind flashed back to late nights in the Lagos co-working space, tracing every path Nathaniel had assumed private, discovering the loopholes, building redundant failsafes, embedding encrypted warnings. Those months of painstaking effort were invisible to the world, yet their impact was immediate. Nathaniel's assistant burst into the office, panic evident. Sir, multiple subsidiaries report discrepancies. Investors are panicking. Nathaniel's hands hovered over the keyboard, hesitation in his posture. For the first time, he felt exposed, not just as a CEO, but as a human being whose decisions, unchecked and absolute, could shake continents. Outside the office, Lagos glimmered under the clear noon sky. The city seemed calm, unaware of the digital storm brewing within skyscrapers. But Nathaniel knew the consequences would ripple outward. Every market, every investor, every algorithm touched by Olivia's precision would be forced to respond. He exhaled, gripping the edge of his desk, knowing that his next move would define not just his empire, but his legacy. The world wasn't watching him yet, but it soon would. And Olivia, unseen but omnipresent, was the architect of the unfolding reality. The office was tense, a silent storm brewing behind the glass walls. Nathaniel stared at the screens, red alerts cascading across every monitor, a visual symphony of disruption. His hand hovered over the keyboard, fingers tense, the weight of the world pressing down on him. He had never felt so exposed, not just as a CEO, but as a man whose every move could now ripple across continents. Get me the financial logs from Lagos, Johannesburg, and London now, he barked, his voice tight with urgency. His assistant, aware that this was no ordinary crisis, sprinted to obey, leaving Nathaniel to wrestle with the gnawing sense of impotence. Every system he had built, every protocol he had designed, seemed suddenly fragile. A flashback struck him unbidden. The early days with Olivia, reviewing spreadsheets together, her sharp eyes catching details he had missed. Back then, she had been meticulous, almost obsessive, and he had teased her for it. "You're paranoid, Olivia," he had laughed. Now, the same meticulousness she had once mocked in him was weaponized against him. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, trying to map the chaos. Every subsidiary reporting discrepancies, investors panicking, global markets reacting in real time. This wasn't just a financial crisis, it was a controlled demolition of his perception of control. Outside the office, Lagos thrummed with life, unaware of the digital storm, but Nathaniel felt every ripple. He could sense it in the quiet tension of his assistants, in the nervous glance of the head of IT, in the subtle vibrations of uncertainty spreading through the office. The empire he had built on precision and dominance now seemed like sand slipping through his fingers. He finally pressed a sequence of keys, launching emergency protocols, tracing every anomaly. Every alert he responded to, every screen he manipulated, was a dance with an invisible adversary. He knew, deep down, that Olivia was behind this. Her absence was her presence. She had left him physically, but her intellect, foresight, and strategy now dominated the room. "Sir, what's our next move?" the assistant asked, voice shaking. Nathaniel's gaze remained fixed on the screens, a mixture of fury and awe in his eyes. "We contain it, for now, but we find her," he murmured, more to himself than anyone else. He realized that the person he had underestimated the most was no longer beside him, not as a partner, but as the architect of the chaos now shaking his world. And in that quiet, high-rise office, he understood. The world was watching, and the first of many shocks had already begun. Across the city, Olivia sat in her Lagos penthouse, sunlight streaming through floor-to-ceiling windows. Her laptop hummed quietly, dashboards alive with activity. She didn't smile. The storm she had orchestrated wasn't for amusement, it was a test of accountability. Every alert cascading through Nathaniel's empire reflected her planning, foresight, and patience. She leaned back, remembering her father's words, "Power is never about what you have. It's about what others think you can control." Those words had guided her since childhood, shaping a mind both strategic and empathetic. She had spent years studying Nathaniel, understanding his strengths, vulnerabilities, and blind spots. Now, she was executing a plan that would expose everything he had built, forcing him to confront the consequences of unchecked authority. Her assistant entered quietly. "The London markets are responding. Panic spreads to New York and Johannesburg," he reported. Olivia's eyes didn't leave the screen. "Good. Let it ripple," she said softly, almost as a whisper to the world. Meanwhile, Nathaniel's office had transformed into a war room. Analysts and assistants scurried, phones ringing incessantly. Each red alert on his screens was a reminder that Olivia's presence lingered, unseen but omnipresent. He realized that her influence wasn't in the market data, it was in the control she had over the narrative. Flashbacks hit him again. The quiet evenings when Olivia had questioned his decisions, her insight sharp, her intuition often proving correct. He had laughed it off then, dismissing her perspective. That dismissal now felt like a mistake of colossal proportions. Olivia's next move was precise. She activated automated contingencies, subtly altering algorithms to highlight discrepancies and force Nathaniel into reactive maneuvers. Each alert he addressed was already accounted for in her strategy. She wasn't destroying him, she was making him accountable, teaching a lesson that no executive seminar could impart. Nathaniel's gaze shifted from screen to screen, sweat forming at his temples. He understood he was no longer in control, but the world didn't yet know it. Every phone call, every email, every market fluctuation he handled was a battle he hadn't prepared to fight. Olivia's eyes, calm and calculating, scanned the room and the dashboards. The world was beginning to notice, but it hadn't yet seen the full scale of her orchestration. Nathaniel, brilliant as he was being forced to confront the limitations of even the most powerful human intellect. And in that moment, Olivia smiled ever so slightly, knowing the crescendo of consequences was only just beginning. The global news ticker blinked across multiple screens, financial markets were reeling, and media outlets across continents were scrambling to interpret the sudden, unprecedented disruptions. Nathaniel paced his office, the tension etched into every line of his face. The emails, phone calls, and urgent messages kept pouring in, a relentless wave he could neither stop nor fully comprehend. Flashbacks flooded him. He remembered the countless evenings he'd spent in the same office, convincing himself that absolute control was his birthright. He had underestimated Olivia's influence, her intellect, and the subtle ways she had always challenged his decisions. She wasn't just a partner. She had been a strategist, a shadow co-pilot steering his empire. And now, in her absence, her fingerprints were everywhere. Across the room, analysts whispered, eyes darting between charts and data streams. "Sir, the London exchange is down 12%, Tokyo markets follow." "It's unprecedented," one of them stammered. Nathaniel's jaw tightened. How did she coordinate this? His voice betrayed disbelief, a rare crack in the armor he had carefully maintained for decades. Meanwhile, Olivia's image dominated social media feeds, anonymous reports hinting at the mysterious woman behind the global economic tremor. Her calculated calm was everywhere, yet no one knew exactly who she was. The world was reacting, speculating, questioning. Nathaniel felt the sting of power slipping from his grasp. Every decision he made now was reactive, defensive, and yet, he could not anticipate the next move. The memory of her father's words pierced through him. Power is never about what you have. It's about what others think you can control. For Olivia, those words had been a guiding principle. For Nathaniel, they now felt like a challenge he could not surmount. He slammed his palm against the glass desk, the sound echoing across the office. Screens flickered with alerts, dashboards blinking warnings in red. Every phone ringing, every urgent email was a reminder. Olivia had left, and the world would never look at his empire the same way again. He slumped into his chair for a moment, a rare display of vulnerability. The irony wasn't lost on him. He had built a fortress of wealth, influence, and technology, yet one person's absence had brought it all to the brink. The world was watching, and for the first time, Nathaniel realized that Olivia's departure had shifted the balance of power forever, and in that instant, amidst the chaos and the global scrutiny, he understood that this was only the beginning. The office was no longer silent. The red numbers were still falling on the screens, but he wasn't looking at them anymore. His phone BRATED. Unknown number. He almost ignored it. He picked up. Hello. There was a pause on the other end. Calm, controlled, powerful. You should have listened. His body stiffened. That voice, he hadn't heard it in months. Her. The woman he underestimated, the woman he divorced, the woman he thought was weak. I warned you, she continued softly. You built your empire on loyalty you never deserved. His throat went dry. This is your doing? He asked, trying to regain authority in his voice. A quiet chuckle. No, she replied. This is the consequence of your own choices. I only stepped aside and watched. He rushed to the window, staring at the Lagos skyline below. The city that once bowed to him now felt distant, fragile. What do you want? He demanded. Nothing, she said. I already have everything. Double quotes clicked. The call ended. Silence. Then another notification flashed across the screen. Board vote. Emergency removal of CEO. His hands trembled. For the first time in his life, he wasn't in control. The boardroom was silent. Not the respectful silence he was used to. This one was different. Cold. Final. The same executives, who once stood when he entered, now avoided his eyes. The massive glass table reflected his face, a tired, strained, unrecognizable. The chairman cleared his throat. We have concluded the emergency vote. He already knew, but hearing it felt like a physical blow. You are hereby removed as CEO. Effective immediately. The words echoed. Removed. Just like that. The man who built the empire. Dismissed from it. He laughed weakly. You can't be serious. But no one laughed with him. Security stepped forward. That was when reality crushed whatever pride he had left. Outside the building, cameras flashed. News spread faster than the market. Crash. Investors pulling out. Partners withdrawing. Accounts frozen. His mistress was nowhere to be found. The friends he trusted weren't answering. He stood on the pavement, in front of the skyscraper that once carried his name. And for the first time, he was alone. Across the city, in a quiet, sunlit office overlooking Lagos, she signed a document calmly. Her legal team stood behind her. The document confirmed the final transfer of controlling shares she had quietly secured long before the divorce. She had never been powerless. She had only been patient. Her assistant handed her a tablet displaying the breaking news. Former CEO removed amid financial collapse. She didn't smile with cruelty. She smiled with closure, because this was never about revenge. It was about dignity, about knowing her worth when he called her. Nothing. About proving that strength does not shout, it waits. Later that evening, as the sun dipped behind the skyline, she stepped outside the building, not as a victim, but as the true owner. Employees straightened when she walked past, not out of fear, out of respect. The same company. The same empire. New leadership. And this time, it would be built on loyalty, not betrayal. He watched the news from a small rented apartment. The woman he once discarded was now the headline. He finally understood something too late. You can betray a person, You can underestimate them, but you cannot destroy someone who knows their value. The screen fades to black. Justice didn't shout. It arrived quietly, and it stayed.